Thank you so much, Chris, and the Margins community for the invitation and for this great opportunity to present Aslı's work, also to share my fan sentiments. So you can imagine what a crazy situation I am in. She's not only a writer I admire, but she's also someone I happen to meet in Berlin, also, which is a brilliant combination of universe for me. Yeah, and also the section we're gonna read is one of my favorite part, and she said, oh, let's pick this part, and it happened to me my most favorite part. So this is pure karma and just manifestation. um, so yeah, Aslı has been asked many questions politically because her very existence in Germany is a result of political results in Turkey. But this time I won't focus on these points because I think she's been a bit exhausted from all these questions. And ultimately, she also always underlines, I am a writer at the end of the day. We know the troubles she has been through, and they are inevitably connected with her works, and it has always been connected, her sensitivity towards the victim all over the world and in Turkey to the Kurdish people. So this has been ingrained in her literature ever since she has started writing. But I will rewind the time back and just gonna focus on her writing, just pure craft, literary nerd talk about writing and literature. And the title of the event, I assume it's self-explanatory, The Literature of Absence. That's her starting point, as she puts in various sources, which I find very interesting, to start with an acknowledgement of absence and non-existence in the first place, and still building such an oeuvre of literature based on absence and void. So also trying to find a language for absence. And in that sense, I want to focus on language. When someone loses a leg or an eye, they're acutely aware of that loss, perhaps even experiencing the phantom feeling of the missing limb. We have words for those who flee war, violence, and persecution, seeking refuge in another country. Yet, we lack a term for those who have lost their cities, the places they once called home. We have words for children who have lost their parents, but we don't have words for parents who have lost their children. And throughout her writing career, Aslı Erdoğan has created a home, a language within her texts. Whether living in Geneva while researching the Higgs boson at CERN, experiencing the bloodthirsty streets of Rio, Brazil, residing in the historic backstreets of Galata, Istanbul, or now in political exile in Berlin, these places represent not just a chronicle wandering of her spirit, but also the point where her literature finds its ultimate expression and meaning. For Aslı, literature has always been the one and only home, a place of refuge and renewal, where she can reclaim her strength and resilience, power by directly confronting the abyss. While coming up with the concept of this event, I was curious about this very inherent lack. What does it say, and what doesn't it say? What is lacking at the end of the day? Such scopes, spaces, and voids are often where literature becomes most fertile, as the literary history shows. And in that barren wasteland, we seek to formulate this absence, posing more solid questions, perhaps, and daringly leaving them unanswered. And this is a very courageous point to end also. For those who are already familiar with Aslı, she's a world-known Turkish writer. I still want to repeat her biography. Aslı Erdoğan is a writer of literature and columnist, human rights defender, ex-political prisoner, as well as a particle physicist. She's the author of 8 books, novels, novellas, collection of poetic prose and essays, translated into more than 20 languages. She was arrested in 2016 for her collaboration with the pro-Kurdish newspaper Özgür Gündem. Aslı Erdoğan has received several prizes in literature and human rights, such as Said Faik Award, Simone de Beauvoir Award, Kurt Tucholsky Award, Erich Maria Remarque Peace Prize, Havel Library Foundation Award, Chevalier de Arts et Lettres, among many others. Her work has been adapted into theater and acted in Milan, Graz, Avignon, into classical ballet, radio, a short film, and finally opera. And at this point, it's worth mentioning that there is a documentary made by Adar Bozbay. She's a filmmaker and Kurdish and queer rights activist from Istanbul. And she and Adar made a documentary about her time in exile in Germany, which is called Incomplete Sentences. Again, incomplete and absence are quite major topics to define her literature. Yes, and now I would like Aslı to read an excerpt. First of all, I just want to underline that it's very interesting to speak English with Aslı, by the way. I take great pleasure speaking Turkish with her. Now I'm someone else, discovering her in English. Yes, and this excerpt is from The Stone Building and Other Places, published by the City Light in 2018. It's available in the US literature market. It's translated by Sevinç Türkan. Yeah.
Okay, and I have an accent in English, so sorry.
Everyone has an accent.
Mine is much worse than you can imagine.
No.
The beginning. By the way, this book has a section called The Beginning, but it has 3 endings, and the reader is free to choose whichever ending he or she would like to have as the finale of the book. But the beginning is one, unique. The facts are obvious, contradictory, coarse, and blaring. I leave the facts like a mound of giant stones to those who busy themselves with important matters. What interests me is the murmur among them, indistinct, obsessive. Digging through the rock pile of facts, I'm after a handful of truths, or what used to be called that. These days, it doesn't even have a name. Lured on by a flickering light, what if I were to dive deeper and deeper, if I could reach the bottom and make it back? I'm after a handful of sand, the song of the sand that slips through my fingers and disappears. Those who speak of the shadow speak of the truth. Truth speaks through shadows. Today I will speak of the stone building, the one that literature. Literature has avoided at all costs, or at least kept at a safe distance, looking out at it from behind words. Constructed long before I was born, it's a 5 stories tall. And if we don't count the basement, and there are steps leading up to the entrance. One must write with the body, with the naked, defenseless body beneath the skin. Yet words only call out to other words. You take a few letters, L and F, vowels I and E, and you write life. The only key is not to confuse the order. Misplace a letter and turn the living clay into simple inert matter. as the legend goes. Life, as I write it, belongs to those who can grab it with a deep sigh, not with a mere breath, like plucking a fruit from its branch, a root from the earth. As for you, what's left is but an echo, like the hum of waves that you hear when you hold an empty shell to your ear. Life, a word consumed down to its very marrow, the hum of a wave, quiet grief, an ocean full of waves. Okay. I didn't like so I shouldn't say.
The translation.
The translation is really.
Okay. So the title is The Beginning, and I wanted to start with that. But also, before diving into literary questions, I think the burning question to ask to you is, how are you, Aslı?
Awful. Awful. I mean, I've been going through a difficult period with my health. I had a major surgery last year and I still couldn't recover. And I have systemic sclerosis, which produces wounds in my hands. So I'm really suffering. Honestly suffering.
But just like the titles of your book, sometimes there's this tone of accepting the defeat of the world, then still getting your resilience back, like big as the how once again, then Shah, then miraculous, and then blood and violence, then once again. So yeah, just for the event, I was like seeing the titles in a chronological order, and it summarizes perfectly actually your journey as well. The point of resilience in your life also. So now I want to ask you a contrast I happen to realize, a perfect contrast, in the sense that you pack an immense amount of information in your books in order to articulate a city that cannot be grasped fully. Big chaotic cities like Rio de Janeiro, Istanbul, or even in Europe, various places, and attempting to capture the essence of a person, of a city, just like James Joyce did in Dublin. But then there comes a point where you just seem to come back and reveal that nope, nothing can be truly captured. Actually, there is an underlying void or a sense of nothingness which you reach at the end, which you give us as the reader. Do you think that you start with this impossibility, or is it an end result which you discovered throughout your writing? Or for example, I also think about Ocean Vuong, an American Vietnamese writer, and in his book On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. For example, in that book, the whole novel is a letter to his Vietnamese illiterate mother. So it starts with an impossibility that you cannot reach your recipient. Do you also start like that, that the truth cannot be conveyed or trauma cannot be articulated? Or still, is there still a belief that there is still hope worth trying? Or is non-existence and existence just exists side by side without being contrast to one another?
Well, I'm a person of contradictions. And my literature is even more than that. The opposites always turn to each other. Metaphors of life become metaphors of death, and then metaphors of death become metaphors of life. The inner world, the inner reality, and outer reality are also contrasting sometimes complementing, side by side, and reversible. The lines are very blurred. What is the inner reality? What is the outer reality? How much of Rio de Janeiro, which is depicted with minutest details, as also I'm a physicist, and I'm kind of a cinematographic writer. I work a lot on details. But as more and more details are put into the descriptions, the sense of unreality is also augmenting, I think, or that's what I try to make. How much of it is Özgür's imagination, and how much of it is out there? And the more we proceed in the book, in Rio City in Crimson Cloak, this blurring becomes more and more apparent. Which is the inner world, which is the outer world. And in fact, in the end, they will reverse. Whatever she has written will start to happen in reality. The inner reality will become the outer reality. Death will become life, life will become death, past will become future, future will become past. Some sort of a mythological universe, which I try to breathe in. Everything is with its opposite, and the sacred and the profane, the past and the future, life and death. And they continuously change places. And I think even from my very first book, that started subconsciously. I mean, it wasn't a choice, but my very first written book was The Miracles Mandarin. And it's about the main character is a one-eyed woman. Now at the age of almost 60, I find it a very daring metaphor for the first book especially. But yeah, I started with a missing eye, a woman whose face is so unsymmetrical that one part is looking into the darkness and the night, and the other into the reality. And it was also, I think, a confession. I told the reader from my first book, I won't see everything. I won't tell you the reality. I'm looking into the darkness. I will tell you about absence and void and darkness more than I can tell you about colors, because I don't see them. I'm one-eyed. This was a very, I think, sincere confession from the very start. I am going to talk about void, which is the most difficult thing to talk about, to bear, to listen, to hear, to imagine even.
And do you think the fact that you decided from the very beginning that you're gonna narrate the void by not just presenting it, but also avoiding giving the full truth? I'm gonna give you the half truth, and that's the only way to reach to my reality, because it is conflicted from the very beginning. So do you think in that sense literature finds its full potential in this negation, that reality cannot be presented fully, like Blanchot said, that literature finds its ultimate fulfillment in negativity and absence? Or do you think language is the alternative to this inarticulate literature, reality, sorry? So do you think your language constitutes reality?
Well, it's a very, very difficult question to answer, but I will give it a little bit of trial. But I feel very close to Blanchot. In many ways, I'm a fan of him, let's say. I'm a less philosophical writer, let's say. In my writing, most of it comes from subconscious, probably. Not everything is intellectually decided. Negation is there. It's deeply embodied in me, in my personal past, in my personal traumas, in my personal quest. And it's really not an intellectual literature that I'm trying to write. I'm trying to write from the body. I want the body to hurt, to be there, to bleed. And I dig deep into myself, to dig into my wounds. And yes, the impossibility is there from the very start. This acknowledgement of that, that I am trying to tell you a trauma which I don't even remember, or nobody remembers. Our memory is a swamp. The language of trauma is very, very difficult to build, but I will try, because I find a meaning in that. And every solution, every answer I can reach in my literature is only momentary. Nothing is certain, nothing is definite, nothing is perpetual in my literature. The beauty is momentary, the sacred is momentary. The door of the dead, the land of the dead opens, Eurydice comes back for a moment. And everything is for that single moment of glory or completion, I would say, which is impossible.
And you arrest our attention also in this very suspense. There's this anticipation: is she gonna come back? Is he gonna make it at the end? It's very suspenseful. It's very loaded in that sense. And sometimes you just open the door and show just one glimpse for a second and just close it again.
Especially in the Rio novel where Özgür walks, it's actually one day, her last day, actually, as the reader we know, a slow walk towards death. But each step there is resurrection. So in a way, I think the whole effect is maybe even more cruel to the reader. At the point we are sure she's going to resurrect once more, she cannot. The banal, stupid, silly, meaningless death is there as the outer reality. It's just one bullet. And it comes. No words are able to stop that bullet.
She does indeed die in a very banal way.
Yeah, just like a street dog, in fact, like a dog in the streets.
Yeah, but what remains is her notebook.
Yeah, but which is also lost. And also, this is what I mean by I bring sacred and the profane together. On one way, her death is totally sacred. She, like Narcissus meeting her own image, his own image, she becomes a part of Rio de Janeiro, which is her love. The loved object and the lover meet. So it's ultimate completion, ultimately sacred death. Her destiny finds its meaning. She lives the destiny she has written for herself. That is the ultimate. But on the other hand, she dies like a street dog in a very dirty back street, in a very stupid robbery. She's misunderstood even by the robbers.
Yeah, language barrier. Yeah.
I mean, it's a totally meaningless death. So I put the two together, and the reader is free to choose which one. Or in the stone building, there is the angel and there is the madman living on the streets. There is a scream and there is a stupid laughter. So there is the choir, but the choir is of tortured children. So I kind of have an obsession with bringing together the sacred and religious themes, which are also, I think, quite risky themes, side by side with the backstreets, prisons, cells, madness, things that we don't even want to look at.
Filth.
Filth, yeah. And I do like bringing the two together, and my life also brought the two together. I mean, on one hand, I love literature and classical music, ballet, and all this very hygienic life. On the other, part of me is lived 2 years in Rio de Janeiro, which was the most dangerous city in the world that time, with drug cartels. I lived in Galata, actually, in Tophagne. I adored the backstreet atmosphere. So I'm a person of contradictions. I mean, and which is the real Aslı, the backstreet girl or the one who listens to Bach and reads poetry? Well, the two can be together, maybe.
Yeah. So they do exist side by side.
Yeah.
Existence and non-existence,
Yeah.
filth and high culture.
Yeah.
You don't put a wall in between them.
Yeah.
You find ghettos in Geneva. You
Yeah.
even feel more belong to there than the high European culture sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they are sometimes more human, I must say. The ending of the Rio novel is totally autobiographical, with the only exception that the guy who took out the gun didn't shoot me. And I can never really interpret or find a reason why. Maybe to let me write this book, I say. But such humanness I've seen from a hardcore criminal. I mean, who else would do it? When people in our bourgeois lives take out their guns, they shoot up. They shoot whatever gun they have. They assert. But a criminal can put his gun back, and I find something kind of sacred in that. Maybe I don't know.
This millisecond decision he took in order not to kill you, just created the work itself. What if I didn't die?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the book was born from that moment. I mean,
the rebirth, actually.
Yeah. I was resurrected, but not through literature, but through the kindness of strangers, as one writer would put it. And sometimes, our life is saved by kindness of strangers, and it is there is something sacred there, I must say.
Well, you also, on the other hand, feel very close and inclined to those who were not that lucky to be saved by a criminal, who were murdered for no reason, tortured. And aside from the obvious empathy, what do you think your literature has to narrate these stories? How do you see the victim?
Again, it's a very difficult question to sum up because victim is also an important part of my literature. I do accept that part of it is my childhood, that I have been a witness to quite a lot of violence, which produced some sort of dichotomy, I guess, in me, the angel and the psychopath, the persecutor and the victim. And there's always a third in this equation, the witness, the trauma of the witness. Part of it is psychological, I admit, but not all. I also have made this conscious choice, especially when I started my columnist work, that my column should be a meeting ground or a corridor, a human corridor, at least to the world of victim, which is most often silenced totally and irreversibly. The victim is is gone most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
His story is lost, his or her story is forgotten, trampled, even reversed. The victim is very often seen as the one who is guilty for whatever has happened to him or her.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, maybe in this little column, I can dedicate my sentences, my talents, my observations, everything, and my psychologically weak, let's say, or traumatized self
Mm-hmm.
to the victim.
Mm-hmm.
This, I think I can do it. And then I started, and who is the victim? What is the victim? It's such a difficult question, of course. And the more I wrote, the more I discovered, the more I wrote. We are all victims.
Mm-hmm.
One part of us is a true victim, in he or she recognizes the victim. But one part of us is oblivious to the sufferings of that victim.
Mm-hmm.
One part is guilty of being oblivious. So I think I kind of summed up my looking at this in the stone building, where there is an angel, a madman, but there's one who betrays and one who is betrayed,
Mm-hmm.
who is under torture, of course, a very tragic circumstance, and one who survives and one who dies. And I said, these are all different selves of the same person.
Mm-hmm.
We are like a shell that has these personas or these voices within us. We hear the victim, we hear the perpetrator, but sometimes they don't hear each other. And this is how I look at trauma. Trauma is this terrible cut, dichotomy in you, where one part of you cannot hear the other part of you.
Divided self.
Yeah, the divided self. Yeah, the divisions, and I don't think I'm unique in that. Many people see our selves as divided, but I arrived at this point, let's say, through my own experience of living, but more than that, writing. I mean, I experience life through writing. I mean, my own traumas are boring and ugly, but when I write them,
they're elevated.
I hear them more. I learn, or I go into their universe more. Is it necessary? I can't answer that. I mean, I've read a lot about concentration camps. I like to read literature produced under the harshest conditions. But I can't answer the question, do we have to do this? Do we have to talk about concentration camps? Do we have to talk about torture? There I have no answer. I choose to do that. I choose to talk about torture, about the victim, because I think the world will be much more void of meaning when the story of the victim is forgotten. It gives a meaning to our world. So this is also an impossibility, of course. I am very, very limited in my personal empathy, my personal understanding of the victim. I mean, it's enormously difficult, but I'm trying. At least I am trying.
Do you think it has also something to do with power and agency? Because you just said that when you write your stories, they have a different, when you write your own traumas, they become something else because it is you narrated.
Yeah.
So the power that was taken from you as a traumatized person, you gain it back when you write it. So do you think also that's the kind of a task? Of course, it's not necessarily a task, but a kind of an innate sense of responsibility. Okay, there is this sense of power which can be given through storytelling only. And this is what I do. Can you also see it in that way?
Well, I can see it as a quest. This is my trial. I mean, maybe my most, how would you say, the real novel, the story, Sting Crimson Cloak, is the most, is the key to that question also. She wants to write Rio de Janeiro, which has terribly traumatized her. But why? Does she believe she's going to overcome her traumas, or is there something else in there? At one point, she says the trauma is like a fly, but if you catch it in literature, it becomes like a fly caught in amber. It becomes an object of beauty. And that is also a pathetic effort she not discovers. I mean, to make an object of beauty, yeah, so what? The fly is there. All she can do is to make a novel out of her traumas. And she goes to the fullest limit a person can go. She writes her own destiny. She writes her own death. And the death comes to her in the form she has written. That is the ultimate power a victim can have. She has written that bullet. But
as a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, as a self-fulfilling prophecy. But as a myth that is much older than all of us. She has become part of an Orpheus myth. But then is this a victory? It's also a very pathetic victory in a way. But also there is this moments of glory in her, and that is moments of completion, I must say, where she meets her mirror image, where she meets Rio de Janeiro, whatever Rio de Janeiro is, that is open to the reader to fill that gap. But yeah, she did it. So yeah,
when this is a fictional character and the story can be curated and built in the form of book, this is fiction. But in your column works, for example, you mentioned Heimat Becker in an event, and you said you really research how to really put trauma, inarticulatable, terrible atrocities into words without making them so pathological and melodramatic. And then there are just facts, like her Jizre writings, for example. Facts, without curating it, without fictionalizing it, because this is real life. It really happened. People were killed, tortured, burned. So yeah, when it's real, you don't fictionalize, you document it also, right? Do you think so?
Let me tell you a personal story. In my first years as a columnist in Radical, I had written about Hanım Baran, a Kurdish prisoner who was at the edge of dying. And me and Perihan Maden and Ahmet Altan, we wrote that she should be released because there is people at the terminal stage of a disease are released. And that right was not activated in her case because she was Kurdish and defenseless. And because of our push, let's say, she was released. And 8 months later, she died. I read in the papers that she died at home with her family. And I felt very ashamed when I realized that I had felt victorious the moment she was released. Then I looked back at my novel. I said, Aslı, you have written a novel about Orpheus, and you haven't understood the myth. There is no victory over death. It's only momentary. And I felt really a deep sense of shame when Hanım Baran died. Maybe other writers didn't feel it. Maybe they felt, okay, she died at home. It's very important not to die in prison. But this also my work as a columnist and as a writer of literature, there is a difference. I said, Aslı, look, these are real people.
Mm-hmm.
Not that my traumas are not real, but my traumas are mine after all.
Mm-hmm.
There are millions of people out there with real tragedies, real deaths, real massacres. And I felt a huge responsibility of a doctor, like, oh, I don't want to give this patient to die in my hands. I have a responsibility to life.
Mm-hmm.
And I do respect my. At that time, I was, I accepted to be a columnist only for economic reasons because I had no money. But now I feel grateful that I did this job. I learned so much about Turkey. I learned so much about Kurds and backstreets and prisons. But I learned so much about the victim.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my own little personal traumas was nothing in that huge sea. And it was a valuable lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is even bigger. I mean, how do you how do you create the language of trauma? I tried different approaches.
Mm-hmm.
I tried Heinrich Becker's approach, bloodless language of facts.
Cold. Mm-hmm.
Ice cold language. Sometimes it works.
Mm-hmm.
I tried the poetic approach in the stone building,
Mm-hmm.
which was actually criticized in Turkey for. I was even accused of being too poetical about a theme like torture. They think it should be a stone-like language. But actually, when I wrote the book, I had not been yet a prisoner. When I went to prison, I realized actually, no, my traumas speak to me in this language. I remember so little of prison. All is a big mist, a big cloud. Traumas don't speak with a stone-like language at all. they have a more mist-like, elusive language. But of course, again, this important thing is this is my personal trauma, and so when you are looking into a massacre, a genocide, a prison, there the issue is always more complicated. How much of it is your trauma? How much of it is the trauma of the other? Where does the two meet? And of course, the other also meaning the audience, the reader. Where do we meet? Can we meet? And it's a very difficult question, I must say.
And speaking of the world, the myth, this very hazy articulation you try to make sense of. Also, when you see a city, you see yourself. The city creates you, and back and forth. It's always a ping pong of co-creation. It has been so until now, I guess, until Berlin became a character in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to ask your relationship with cities in that sense, because it's a kind of a neutral space, but it is also very loaded for you. It is the city you live in exile. And bizarrely, you hear a lot of Turkish speaking people also. So it's kind of Turkey, but not really. It is self chosen. No, it's not. It is kind of imposed. So do you think, like the scene in Stone Building, the woman looking through the window and seeing the city as a monument that she has no contact with? How do you see Berlin in that sense, as an in-between space? Is there an interaction between you and Berlin?
Well, the cities are actually probably main characters of most of my books. There's the Geneva of the one-eyed woman, the night of the Geneva. In Rio de Janeiro, Özgür and the city are like two mirrors. It's a game of mirrors, and it's a fatal game. They are going to kill each other.
It's in love and kill.
Yeah, they are in love, and they are going to. It's a deadly game and deadly combat, which is probably the only way to have a relation with Rio de Janeiro. I mean, it was a very tough city when I lived there in the 90s, with 6,000 dead per year officially, but the real figure being about 18,000. It was war. It was war, honestly. And it really created the person I am, I must say. It's a city I died in. I often say, it's not a city I lived in, it's a city I died in. And when we come to the books after, when I returned to Istanbul, for example, there is this image, that's one of the main metaphors. A woman is looking at a city at night. It's a very old city. And if you look at a outside world with a light source behind us, we see our own face, our own image on the window. And everything else, the outer world, becomes part of our face. And our face, it becomes part of everything. There is no outer world without our reflection. There is no outer reality, actually. The outer, there is no objective outer reality. Everything we look at, we see ourselves. And that is kind of the main metaphor of all my writing, I must say. Yeah, I do accept. I can't see the outer world. All I see is my own reflection on the outer world. And when I try to see my own reflection, it's again only the outer world that is being visible through a few lines. So I really dwell on this metaphor. And with Berlin, it's even,
There's a whale that you can see a reflection. What is this whale?
It's
such a strange place to live in, by the way.
It's even a more pathetic question. And you see, Berlin, I didn't choose Berlin. I'm in exile here. From one glance, it looks like the city I would like to write about. It is a traumatized city. It is just like me, has been separated into two. It has a huge history of massacres, genocides. I mean, it's really innovating. I mean, for a writer like me. But on the other hand, I find it like I'm looking at a granite, cold face. I can't talk to it, doesn't hear. I'm behind the window. I simply can't reach the city. Also, maybe it is bad luck, I must say, because 2 months after I came to Berlin, the pandemic of the century, Corona came. And a few months later, I was diagnosed an autoimmune disease. Then I had brain hemorrhage. So the image of Berlin is very much mixed with the images of hospitals, hospital corridors, ICU,
medical bureaucracy,
and feeling also very vulnerable. I mean, it is not easy to be diagnosed an autoimmune disease in the midst of a viral pandemic and in exile. It's really so if I can write Berlin, I can write many things. But before that, I also have the promise of writing the self-made promise of writing the prison. And yeah, it is not that easy after such big traumas. I do understand now people who said, oh, you could write torture because you were not tortured. In a way, it's true. It is. It has another kind of difficulty, this self-confrontation. If it's a personal trauma,
so half truth / half reality is easier to write about.
Maybe
100% lived through reality cannot be narrated.
Well, I mean, if it's extreme reality like the ones I had, I mean, I was prison is. Let me put it this way: it's not that difficult to write a prison novel. I can do it in 2 months, or to write my memories. But I'm more ambitious than this. I want to catch the language, the sound, the music of the prison, of this void. And it is not easy to even to myself to bring back the sounds of prison is not easy. And to do it for the reader is much more difficult, much more of a challenge.
Doesn't it also mean that you live in a constant post-traumatic disorder when you think about the atmosphere and try to grasp it? Because you have to be there mentally.
Yeah.
Just to get 1% of it, you know, it means you're in another dimension in this traumatic situation. Not just the memoirs and the diary entries, but the very spirit. You need to go there back.
Yeah, I need to go there, and if I go there, I can't come out, or one part of me will never come out. Yeah, I have the official diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I do suffer from post-traumatic symptoms, probably since Rio de Janeiro. I was in the witness of the war between the military and the drug cartels. And I developed first symptoms of Vietnam syndrome there. But prison and then exile, of course, is accelerated the whole thing. Yeah. So the question is unanswerable. Going back to the trauma right there, right in the center of prison. Will it help me? I don't know. Will it help the reader? I hope so. Maybe it will be my end, maybe, but yeah, maybe if I can write 2 or at most 3 beautiful sentences about prison, it's enough for me. I'm not more ambitious.
Beautiful sentences.
Just few beautiful sentences, a few beautiful stories, beauty in that filth.
In Germans, they have this saying, the only way is through. There's no like walking side by side or walking around it. Just the only way is through. I don't know in which context they mean that, but it is also a place where you see that there's a lot of acceptance and shame, and it's full of monuments, signs of shame, and so on. So there's a lot of acceptance and this capacity of looking to the past. Whereas Turkey is the opposite. Per se.
I totally agree. I mean, we should give credit to German society or to Germany too. They have gone to such limits of self-confrontation. I would say no other country has done. They do confront their past. And I do believe that people and societies grow up by self-confrontation. Turkey is refusing to grow up. Turkey is like a little child running from dictator to dictator. Just refuses to confront the past and even confront today, what's happening today. I mean, it's so I thought also my column could be at least a trial to, this is the reality of Turkey. That's the reality of Kurds. That's the reality of Armenians. That's the reality of prisons. That's the reality of police stations. Just take a look. And yeah, for that, I think I was punished very severely, very severely. Just calling for this simple confrontation and a bit of conscience. This was almost a sin. And in today's Turkey, it's almost a sin. Yeah.
Considering,
I'm sorry, can I jump in? We're actually at time, but I think we can take a couple minutes. I think at least I think Tariq wanted to ask a question. Do you want to go ahead though? You can, if you want to close it up for a minute first, Çağla, if there's anything else you want to say.
there was one more question, but very, very briefly, you can say, I don't know, or just one word, however you feel like. If you were to write that prison book, who would be the audience now, you think? Who would be the reader, you imagine?
Well, I have written once, every time I start writing, I have an imaginary reader. We hold hands from the first sentence, and in the last sentence, we separate. That reader never exists.
An imaginary reader.
It
has always been like that.
Yeah, an imaginary reader.
Okay. Your readers are keenly awaiting your main book in Turkey, also in Europe. But who is left in Turkey also?
Well, yeah, that's a very sad question. Yeah, Turkey. I mean, it's quite desperate at this moment. It's becoming more and more difficult to keep my belief in literature. Let's say, looking at the world, looking at Turkey. Have I wasted my words? Have I wasted my efforts, my life? But then, what else can we do apart from believing in words, power of words?
We don't have any better. That's all we have. Thank you so much, Aslı. Thank you. And now I would like to ask the attendees if they have any questions to pose. If not, then Tarek, can we? Not Tarek, sorry. Chris, can we have a short reading, or the time is already due? I think it's due. Okay.
We can actually go ahead because the other sessions can continue to take place. I might jump out to go make sure that everything's okay over there, and then I'll come back in so we can wrap up. But yeah, you can go ahead and do the reading. Yeah. And a question as well.
Okay.
You do
it in Turkish.
No, in English.
I miss hearing Turkish from.
But you translated it.
No, but come on.
No, please.
First,
please, let's. You do it. You have a better accent.
No, it's not about accent.
Come on. Do it.
No, but we want to hear your Turkish.
Okay, first
I will. Okay. Okay, so this is an excerpt from Hayatın Sessizliğinde in the Silence of Life, called Madem If It Is So. So Aslı kindly asked me to translate it, this excerpt. I try to stick with the tone she has. I was what was worn down by time. I was a body filled with mysteries. I was the memory of waters and the first light merging with darkness. I was the melody that started everything. I was the womb. I was breasts full of milk. I was the soil waking from the deepest sleeps. So why can't I be born? If I was all of these and yet still myself, why is nothing inside me, not even the pain, truly mine? If it took millennia to form me from legends, myths, images, concepts, languages, then why, until today, have I not found a place or even a word in which I could exist? If there is nothing new to say under the sky, if every sentence, every line, every story has been voiced countless times, whose scream am I the echo of? Whose silence? If I were the moon that dies and is reborn infinitely, that emerges from nothingness and grows, dragging the waters of the ocean in its wake, how could I know so well the distances and the ends? If my strength reached even to hell, what was it that defeated me? Eğer gücüm cehenneme yetiyorsa neydi beni yenen?
Yetseydi neydi peki beni yenen?
Neydi beni peki yenen?
Yani,
Burayı Türkçe söylemem gerekiyordu.
I remember that sentence very much in prison. If I was strong enough to withstand the hell, but what was it that has defeated me? This is also a very, very feminine passage, of course. There is the language of being a woman, the myths of being a woman. This is one of my most feminine books, let's say.
Yes, and here she talks about her mother and the reflection of herself in the eyes of her mother, which is called What Remains Incomplete. A perfect title, also the similar title with the documentary Incomplete Sentences. When my mother looked into my eyes for the first time, she encountered a distorted reflection of her own face in a tiny black orb framed by a pale blue ring. Did she feel as though she was at the very beginning of her life, as if it were just starting now, or did she feel misplaced, like a period awkwardly placed in the middle of a sentence? Did she feel the urge to turn away and leave, or to let herself go, as if surrendering to the waters, into intertwined, circular, desolate worlds? She must have felt not the pain, but the coldness of the blade that separated me from her. This was perhaps the exact moment when she sensed that her fate had betrayed her, and a fate becomes such only by betraying. Or it was the moment when the life that had demanded everything from her but given very little in return, suddenly filled with meaning and the promise of meaning to the very last drop. Light follows shadow, just as life follows death, and fate follows the steps of a human being. She must have felt how life, made up of beginnings and endings, of starting over and finishing again and again, could be so irrevocable, so mercilessly irreversible, and she must have closed her eyes. This long, bittersweet, unfinished gaze stayed with me like a birthmark, a farewell repeated in every word, expressed in another form, echoing, spreading, growing, and never ending. Yes.
Yeah, this is a passage my mother hates. She says, I didn't close my eyes. I'm sure she did. But it's a kind of central, it's a very simple, those two passages are simple passages, but kind of central to my writing, I must say. Yeah, this is the question. What is missing? What is absent?
Incomplete.
What is incomplete?
Yeah.
Where is the farewell? There's beginnings and ends, but something irreversibly lost. And it's a trauma also here, the trauma of separation. And of course, almost in a way, rejection from the mother, maybe. Rejection of...
to create yourself.
Yeah.
I don't want my reflection in your eyes.
Yeah,
I create my own reflection.
Yeah, I don't want my reflection. I don't want to see my reflection. The human being doesn't want the reflection. at this point. Anyway, we talk too much, I guess. Yeah.
No, it's been amazing. We can talk 5-6 hours more. You can see how packed everything is. This was just a glimpse, the surface of it. And thank you very much, Chris, for the organization and the Margins community and everyone who participated, and US people who woke up at 9 a.m. to catch up an American event, two Turkish women talking about literature. Thank you. That's very dedicated and passionate, I find. Yes, and these are the English translations of Aslı's book available in the US market as well.
Unfortunately, I have at least 4 books in several languages, Swedish, Norwegian, Italian, but English market is quite close to me. So I have only 2 books. And
The Crimson Cloak, The City in Crimson Cloak, the one about Rio, that's the Turkish version. This is the English translation.
And the Stone Building and other places.
Yes,
and
that's the most recent one.
Yeah, and I do think I'm not happy with the translations, but
we do have for attendees a bookshop link that has the material, and so your book is listed on that as well. And that too, this was my introduction to your work, and I just feel really spoiled that I got to have this intimate listen to you and your experience and your life as my introduction. So it was really really beautiful for that, and I'm excited to share this with the attendees as well, so that more people can see and hear this. Just really great, and how much it resonates with the conference theme is reclamation. So that whole idea, of taking it back, and that's really the theme that we're talking about throughout the conference. And it just really, I think in the world today, with everything that's happening all around the world, of just that idea of how many of us, through all these different experiences, are really fighting and needing to do that, to take back our spaces and our places, and how important the written word can be for that. If we can't change the literal situations that we're in, to be able to express that and share that with the world. Fortunately, that we can do that in a lot of cases with the written word, where we can reach that audience. So.
And thank you very much for this opportunity. And sorry, I'm not in my best state, as I suffer from various health problems. Next time I'll be better.
Okay, well, you were fantastic, so no need to apologize. Yeah.
Such a great pleasure for me. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye Adar.
Bye bye. Teşekkürler her şey için, sağ olun. Görüşmek üzere. Çok keyifliydi.
Çok sağ ol.
Nasıl kapanıyor?
Direkt kapatıyorum. Okay, ikimiz kaldı. Bye bye.
All right, bye bye.